people, no connection whatsoever. They just met yesterday. But there is this unexpectedness and there's this community building aspect of it that is just fascinating. And I'm going to be asking a lot of those questions in terms of, but first I'm going to ask about reinventing something, right? So maybe you first in terms of Jennifer is that you basically inherit an iconic Southern California radio station with really basically a cult following. It wasn't broken, right? It was really great to begin with, but you started to pivot it and to rebuild it to what it is, and continuously pivoting when I'm listening to it. Were there a reason why you thought that change and reinventing the radio station was important to you?
Yeah, I think it's just anxiety. The anxiety is that KCRW won't be relevant sometime in the future because we think we're so great. So everything that I am interested in, I feel like my role is as the head of the organization is how should we position ourselves now for how we should be 5 years and 10 years from now, which creates a lot of anxiety, which is why I have my best ideas at like 2 or 3 in the morning when I wake up in panic. And then I write them down and pretend to go back to sleep and send delayed emails so people don't know that I'm up at 3 in the morning.
And I know that there are a few people from KCRW over here, like answering your emails right now. But so going to Lindsay is that you and your partner, Matt, business partner, Matt, opened a Japanese restaurant. Neither one of you are Japanese. I mean,
no, we're not.
You're not. I
No.
know Matt's not. But you went on to kind of reinvent the Japanese cuisine of all places in Hong Kong. What made you, what was it that motivated you to say, I'm going to start a restaurant and I'm not Japanese, he's not Japanese, but I'm going to open a Japanese restaurant. What made you?
I don't think we ever specifically decided to open a Japanese restaurant, and I don't think even now I would define it as a Japanese restaurant. I think the cuisine is modern Japanese, and Matt's skill set is Japanese. And so you just fall in love with their attention to detail and the specificity in their craft and how long they hone a skill. And so just naturally, that was how we approached our own brand or our first restaurant.
I'm going to talk a little bit about your backgrounds, right? Which is very interesting. I always thought it was interesting that Jennifer has always lived in Southern California. And I said, you're the only person that I know in the world that born in Southern California, lived in Southern California, and then worked in Southern California, right?
Because you don't know that many not that interesting people, that's why.
No, and on the other hand, Lindsay, you're like transplant like several times over. You were born in Alberta, Canada, which is, from what I hear, is kind of like dogs.
Did Eugene tell it? Eugene and I grew up very close.
Yes.
Yeah.
I said there's nothing over there, and it just so happens that Eugene and you were in that town, and you never met each other either. That's just fascinating. Anyway, and then from Alberta, Canada, you moved to New York, and then you moved to Hong Kong, and then now probably you might even move to Los Angeles. So I'd like to ask about how these two different choices of residency, like for you, Jennifer, you basically popped yourself in Southern California and said, this is where I'm going to.
Well, let's just be specific. I was born and raised in a suburb. When I moved to Los Angeles, it was like moving to Paris. So I feel like I did move. And then I've lived in Venice and in West Adams. So that is like two totally different places.
That counts.
That's true.
And it actually, driving between them is like driving to another country. It takes forever. So I am traveling every day. So there is diversity in my back.
How about you, Lindsay? Do you want to talk a little bit about how? So I want to really kind of as time permits, to talk a little bit about how those backgrounds um, influenced you in terms of how you build your community. You build your KCRW community, the audience community, and you, of course, build your community through your Miss Bish, through Ronan, through Yardbird, Sunday's Grocery, and all the other things that you have been doing. So, so Lindsay, first, if you could talk about how you feel about your background into Alberta, New York, Hong Kong, and maybe.
I've been thinking about it a lot, and I think the nomadic nature I've had comes from being a first-generation Asian Canadian, where my dad, was very much an immigrant and grew up that way, and sort of never feeling, I never had a community that reflected, well, I didn't even know what I looked like or what where I fit in. Where I grew up, also in a suburb, I was the only Asian, I'm only half Asian too, and I was the only Asian person in my high school. And so I was always building my own communities so that I was automatically included. So, whether that was like running for student council or, just trying to fit in and then bringing people along with me. And so that's sort of what I've always done every time I've moved, is just try and make other people feel included and powerful or valuable or part of some kind of team. And I only recently have I started to maybe truly understand what I was doing as I've gotten older. But reflecting, I think that's what I've always done, is just try and build an inclusive community for people who maybe don't know where they fit.
Yeah. So to segue from that, Jennifer, the transplant that you're doing on a daily basis on 110 to 405 and then to 10, how do you think your background influenced the way that you build your community? And do you think that it had any influence or any effect at all?
Well, I think, again, growing up in the suburbs, like I used to call Torrance, and again, I apologize, but I'm just going to be honest. I used to call it like a wannabe blue-collar town, because there was no, like, I was a smart kid, but I had to like try to pretend like I wasn't so I could be cool. Like, I don't think that happens anymore, thank God, but I just felt like I was around people who were not curious. And so when I arrived at KCRW as a volunteer, when I was a very young person, I was like, wow, these are smart people. I'm around smart people who are really curious and know what's happening in the world. And so for me, I feel like that is the energy that inspires me every day, is that I get to talk to people who are excited by ideas and culture and music and creators, people who are creative and who make the time and effort to create beautiful things, whether someone sees it or not. I mean, that's inspiring to me. People who design cities, things like that is exciting, and people who want to talk about that, those are the people that I want to be around. So that's the community that I'm always interested in creating, and I feel like in Los Angeles, there's lots of people who feel that way, who want to be connected with that, and beyond Los Angeles. Just being able to talk about big ideas. I mean, it's especially in a culture of Los Angeles where you spend so much time in your car. You're by yourself generally, and you have this ability to like kind of be transported away from the fact that that you are the traffic. You're learning and connecting with people when you're alone, and I think that's really incredible. It's magical. And so I don't know, maybe that, my background of I had, very intelligent parents, and I just was like, wow, there's just, I don't know, it's the suburbs. It's like, let's go to the mall. I'm like, oh, okay, let's go to the mall. So I guess my interest was trying to run away from that. I think when we were talking backstage, Lindsay, you were kind of like fleeing from that, culture.
Eugene's the only person who I would offend here, but yeah, I left basically the day after I graduated high school.
To New York.
I went to Calgary first,
Uh-huh.
which was only like 300 kilometers south, but that was a big like white collar city where the headquarters, the offices of the oil and gas businesses were there. So there was a higher level, I think, of education per se. And then I spent about 2 years there, and then I moved to the East Coast.
So New York seems to be a very stimulating place, right? What made you say, I've had enough and I'm going to move to Hong Kong?
Well, ironically, I got pregnant, and my plan before having a child was to move to Japan because I was studying Japanese while I was working for Nobu.
Oh, okay.
So I wanted to move to Tokyo. I wanted to perfect my Japanese and like really go in that direction. And then as soon as Lily came into the picture, I just realized that wasn't probably realistic. And but I was ready to leave New York. I had not learned everything, but I had been broken and like, beat down by that city, and then, had found a really great space to learn and to grow. And I knew I was ready to move on to something else.
So I'm going to jump to entrepreneurship because Lindsay is quite obvious that she's an entrepreneur, but what I see at KCRW on a constant basis, how you're being entrepreneurial as well. I think you encourage people to have independent. I think there's a program called Independent Producers Program that you encourage people to do content development, and I think you did it even before people were talking about content being the king. I mean, KCRW was always, in my mind, always really pushing for new content and either be music or news or or drama or all of those. And I was wondering, even in that context of public radio station, I know that you talked about anxiety, but what is that is driving you to be so entrepreneurial, and as a matter of fact, pushing your people to be entrepreneurial as well?
Well, I think, first of all, like my predecessor, the founder of KCRW, she never created a radio station to create a radio station. She was just making really interesting programming.
I remember her.
Yeah, so it doesn't always fit together, and it doesn't make sense for running a radio station. We have cutting edge music and NPR news and a show about literature by this very peculiar man with a peculiar voice, and it's like that just sounds like a random train wreck, but it's not. It's all ultimately connected by these big ideas. And I think when you don't think that you're this thing that you're supposed to be, then the world is open to you. And so my interest is in always building a community of people who are connected. And so the first part is for them to connect with us, and then the second, like nirvana, is when they connect with each other. And all through that, we have this exchange where we create great programming, people support us even though they don't have to. And from that, when we get that support, you end up saying, oh, there's a lot of room to explore that community. If you know who your people are. Yeah. And they're a diverse group, but they all care about curiosity. And John was saying earlier about this creativity IQ. And that's what I feel like we feed and foster. So when you start from that position, you can kind of go anywhere. And I always want us to be something exciting and new. And that, of course, is fueled by my 3 a.m. anxiety dreams. So it works out well.
And you heard about this confession before, is that KCRW is really the only radio station that I listen to. So I'm actually very, very objective about my opinion. But for the longest time, and the first 10 years, I refused to pay to play. I heard on the radio station at KCW, and then there'll be fundraising. I said, I'm not paid to listen to radio. It should be free, right? For 10 years. But I was just thinking that within that 10 years, of course, I was very guilty. I felt very guilty about it. Yeah, but
at least we have that.
Yes, the community.
You were paying. You just weren't paying with dollars. Yeah. That's all that matters.
But I think that it was so great that gradually, and it took a little bit longer. I think that I feel bad that it took me 10 years, but now that I'm a grown up, I think it will be much shorter in terms of like being part of it, is that the community that you build in terms of being a stakeholder to KCRW, I feel like I'm part of that community, and the way that KCRW does that is really great. Some people say that they came for the music and stayed for the news. Myself, went for the news and then stayed for the music, but and this is something that I'm going to go back and ask you about, is that, so Lindsay, you being a serial entrepreneur, is that, and quite successful at that, and you as well in terms of building KCRW, is that, why can't you just slow down? I mean, why can't you just like smell the roses a little bit? The same as you, is like, look at KCRW, look at what you've achieved, Lindsay, and say, I'm gonna just really kind of cruise for a little bit. Why can't you do that?
I'm trying to, actually, actively, and I'm trying to focus more. But I think that it's hard, especially when you have a small taste of, let's say, success. And I don't really think I'm not being, I don't know what the word is. I'm not trying to sound arrogant, but I don't really feel successful. And not in a negative way, but in a way that I just think there's actually so much more, not even I can do, but the people I work with, that we can do together. I feel an enormous responsibility towards everyone that I work with, to continue to provide new things for them to do and new opportunities for them to explore. And I think I'm driven by fear and challenge, where if I don't know how to do something, I'm hell-bent on figuring it out, but also knowing fully well that I might not be able to do it, which I've had to come to terms with as well. Knowing that some things just don't work, knowing that some things end, and being okay, I think, failing. I'm okay with that now.
Okay with failing?
Yeah, like I'm okay with
No.
I'm okay with starting something and it not being exactly what I thought it was going to be.
That's interesting.
Like-
So what do you think?
I totally agree with you. And I think I know when that really, like what you said, fear and challenge, that is definitely like the story of my life. And, but I had this epiphany. So I'd taken on this job, took over for a founder, big shoes to fill, felt very unsure of myself, of course, had no idea what I was doing, and was like, oh my God, I hope I don't screw this up. I hope I don't screw this up. And then I took like a break over the Christmas holidays, and I woke up at like 4 a.m. or whatever, and I was like, oh my God, we're all gonna die. And I was like, thank God. I just felt so much relief, because I'm like, oh, we're all gonna die, and it doesn't matter. So if I run this thing into the ground, so what? I'm gonna die, and then people are gonna like move on.
Yeah.
And it just was liberating. And so that's
It took
kind
you
of
that long to know that you were gonna, everyone's gonna die.
okay, yeah, we say that, but you don't really feel it,
That's
you
right,
know?
yeah.
I felt it, and I was like, oh, and I remember when I was in high school, I would go running, and I would feel really depressed, but I'd go look at the ocean and near where you live in Palos Verdes, and I'd watch the water crash, and I'd say, oh, those sand pebbles, like we're all a bunch of sand pebbles. We're irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. And there's something very comforting about that, because failure is ultimately this big, It's like, so what, I run KCRW to the ground. I tried hard,
And who really cares more than you?
Right.
No one. No one
Yeah.
cares.
So
Yeah, that's what I'm
anyway,
like. No one cares.
and then I'd be dead, and then you guys wouldn't remember me, and
Yeah.
there'd be another KCRW, it'd just be called something else, and Lindsay would start it.
No.
And it would be very successful.
So just among friends, and it won't go out of this room, I think, is that, do you think that you would ever leave KCRW?
I'm going to die there, as I've just told you. No, I don't know. I sometimes I'm embarrassed telling people like, oh, I've been at KCRW for 25 years. I've been with my husband for like almost 30 years. I'm like a stayer, you know, I'm a stayer. And so I don't know. I mean, if I definitely will leave when I need to leave. Like I have been through things where people stayed too long and it is so sad. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm always like, should I go? You know, so yeah, probably at some point.
Which is very interesting because being in the business world is that, and dealing with a lot of businesses, a lot of people will say that, what's your exit plan? What is your exit plan? Do you have an exit plan, right? So, but do you have an exit plan, Lindsay?
I have thoughts all the time about like just going and applying for a job. I have dreams where I'm like, oh, I wonder if anyone would
never
just
applied for
hire
a
me.
job?
Not like a real world job. Like until this, I was like a floor captain at a restaurant. That was my last job, working for somebody else.
That's with Nobu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I dream now about like, when I'm like, I wonder if I could like get a job at Vans. I wonder if I could work for you. I wonder if I just wanted to like not stress out all the time, A, could I do that?
Yeah.
Or B,
Yeah.
then I'm like,
Working for someone, no stress at all. I mean,
no,
absolutely
none, zero.
Yeah.
Of course, I'd be the perfect employee. My other thing is that like I don't think I'm ever going to stop working. So yes, I hope to exit some of my current businesses in a financial position that would reduce my stress level, but I don't think that my stress is directly fiscally related. So I don't think that would solve anything. I think that I'll just constantly work, and it will. I don't think it doesn't feel like work to me most of the time. So I hope I get to continually do things.
Yeah. I got the permission to ask this question as well because we talked about work quite a bit, and I asked if it was okay for me to ask these questions, and they said, sure, ask away. Is that both Lindsay and Jennifer are mother to mixed race children, right? You have two, and you also have
two, yeah.
And they're mixed race. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experience in terms of raising children. In Hong Kong, maybe it's a little bit different, but of course in the United States as well. Are there any experiences that you think are worth sharing in an unexpected connection environment?
Well, I'm actually extremely envious of my children's social community because it's the polar opposite of how I grew up. They don't even know. They don't think I'm Chinese. They don't know that they're Chinese. And now they're in international school where the majority of their friends, their first language is not even English. It's French or it's Spanish or whatever, Cantonese. Then they're learning Mandarin at school. Everyone goes on holidays to wherever they're from, and that's all over the world. And they have this incredible freedom to not even think about race. And I grew up only thinking about race. And so in that case, I think I'm really, as much as I don't like Hong Kong for the urban and the city aspect and the constant reminder of money and how much money you have or you don't have, they do have this really amazing community of global citizens, and I like that.
Jennifer?
Yeah, I think my kids have a different experience. So my husband is African American and Japanese. They have two older sisters. My stepdaughters are also mixed. So I'm the odd man out in our family. I'm the one who looks like who's that in your picture? So I actually like that position for them. I think that they're like this, basketball team, and I am like the water woman or some water girl. But I think that with my kids with their Black heritage and they really are very aware of how people perceive them. I don't perceive them. I perceive them as my children, but I'm very conscious to not negate their experience because in the United States, even in Los Angeles, what you look like often it very much affects how you're treated. And I think about it a lot, I worry about it. I want them to be perceived as intelligent as they are, and I want them to have all the opportunities and not be held back because of prejudice. So it's interesting. They're super woke. They're super active. They're extremely aware. They're 16 and 18. They can run stuff. They got it all together. But it is gonna. I don't know. I think it's. I don't think people who have I think that white kids honestly don't understand how easy they have it in the world. And that doesn't mean anything. They shouldn't feel bad about it. But I'm always conscious that I grew up in a white environment as a white person, and it's not the same road that my daughters have. I think they're going to go far and be fine, but I think it's just important to not ignore it, you know?
Yeah. That was one of the really kind of like the unexpected connection, because in terms of just coincidentally, both of you were parents to mixed race children, and I thought that in this age, how that might affect the way that you see the world, and you just answer that as well. So before we go into the audience question, is that so unexpected connection. What do you think are some of the unexpected connections that you have experienced in the past that have kind of changed something? I mean, not like drastically, but if something has changed drastically, please share that. But are there any unexpected connections that, because of the fact that you had an open mind about those things, that have led to something? Can you share any experience that you might have had?
I mean, I feel like my whole every day is an unexpected connection for me because, I don't know, I'm always surprised by the people I get to meet. But I was just randomly scrolling through these podcasts, and I heard this one called Us and Them. It was by this guy from West Virginia, and it was about kind of like, I think they call them like the hill people and the something else, the valley people or whatever, but the differences in that community. And this guy, I just was like, that guy's inspiring. And so then I heard him say his email, I wrote him an email, and I'm like, are you ever in LA? And he's like, I'm gonna be there next week. And so we had him come talk to our team, our staff, and then now that we're doing this thing called Red and Blue, and it's all about sharing, what people think about this election or life in general from West Virginia and from Los Angeles. And, that's just one thing that I feel lucky that I get to turn my unexpected connections into actual programming and share it with the world.
Lindsay?
Actually, yeah, that's a good way to articulate. I think now everything, not that I expect things, but they become more predictable. But opening the restaurant, I think in Hong Kong, unexpectedly connected me to you through Eugene and even Alex, Eugene's now wife, who became my business partner. Connecting fashion and food, streetwear and food, skate and food, music and food, all of those things. Now that we've connected them once or twice, I guess it doesn't seem as unexpected, but the opportunity every single day that if you get to feed people and entertain people, there's such a neutrality in that. You can approach people and have conversations with people where people seem to let down their guard when you're eating together or you're drinking together. Very different than trying to schmooze at a fashion show. Everyone's trying to be somebody, but after 3 shots of sake, you're really who you are. After 10 shots of sake, you get to know somebody very well.
About 12 shots for me, but okay.
Yeah. So that's been the best connection, and it was unexpected in the beginning, and now I'm just very, very grateful.
I do want to add that it's so fascinating to hear what Jennifer said about kind of the unexpected connection of programming as well, because she mentioned about Joe Frank, which when I moved from New York, that was like the first program that I heard, like, and I know that you were producing or working with him as well, and also Jonathan Gold,
Mm.
and then you were the person that brought in Evan Kleiman, and because Good Food, I still remember Good Food. You watch it, and it was on Saturday Night Live. Like it was like kind of like a skit of Good Food, like, oh, hoo hoo, like that. But you made it into this iconic program, and then you were responsible for connecting Evan Kleiman and Jonathan Gold in some sense, right? Because it was at first to say, oh, that's so natural, and then they didn't even know each other. So I
Right.
thought that was really kind of unexpected in my mind as
Yeah.
well too. So, okay, I'm gonna ask a few questions. We still do have time. How is engaging people with voice easier or harder than engaging people visually?
Well, I mean, this may be totally made up, but I really believe this. I think the human voice is the most elemental and powerful connection point, and I think it starts from when you're in utero, because you can hear the voice of your mother. I feel like you can, without distraction, you can really understand someone's personality by listening to them talk. And I believe that when you're listening, especially when you're alone with headphones or just around with yourself and this audio connection, it's like you can feel really emotionally connected to someone, different than like visuals. Visuals, there's a lot of competition. Like, I don't like their shirt, their hair looks weird. But the audio, it's like you're just in there and all you're doing is connecting with ideas and thought. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah.
And I think that, what I love about the whole on-demand or podcast listening that's starting to grow really large in our consciousness is that people are finding more time to listen. And I have to believe that that's the savior of humanity,
Oh my God.
is that
yes.
we listen to each other, not just hear ourselves talk, but actually listen to someone else. And in a sense, when you're listening to the radio or a podcast, you're forced to listen to someone because they're not listening to you. And so you can learn a lot. Yeah.
That's so true. To listen, to kind of train yourself to listen more. That's really very true. So for Lindsay, do you have a system to accomplish so much in so many different industries? Because, like I mentioned, I mean, you're in food, you're in fashion, you're in libation now. And,
Always.
I mean, yes, consuming and producing. But teach us your ways, ask someone.
Honestly, I don't do as much as people think I do. Like, I'm really good at taking an idea and figuring out how to break it down and delegate it to other people to execute. And I'm not a micromanager. I'm not a perfectionist. I'm really not. I'm not at all. I'll put something out there that is not perfect just to see, get feedback, make it better. Just get it out there. Otherwise, it's never going to happen. And then I like for people, on my team or that I work with to feel empowered and to learn from their mistakes. And so if I was controlling every single thing that I did, I wouldn't have any time to think or to sleep or to... I'm really into self-care too. So I need to be mentally healthy. I need to be physically healthy in order to be the best I can be for everybody else.
Mm-hmm. So I think one question for Jennifer and then one for you, Lindsay. How do you feel radio helps change views on diversity and LGBT issues? Yeah, because, you have to save the world with public radio stations.
Well, I mean, I think all the power of something like public radio, whose mandate is not to make money, but to represent and be a community service, is that we have the power to, and it's cheap with a microphone, to go hear what people think and feel from all different kinds of communities. And so when you're listening to KCRW, you're going to hear all of it. And I think the thing that I love to hear is people saying like, oh, I heard this story in KCRW, and it was something that I didn't expect. That's the repeatable part of what we do. And if it's good and unexpected, if it's an unexpected connection, then it is more repeatable, and people will share it. Like, wow, my life was altered in a positive way because I learned this thing that I didn't know about a community or a person or an idea that I didn't know before. So I think ultimately that's how public radio can do that.
So one last question for you, Lindsay. How do you manage the team and culture of your brand? That's the question.
Well, I mean, the very simple answer is that I grew up in like skate and snow, and they don't teach you culture. You're part of that culture, right? It's stickers and t-shirts, and it's just being out with friends, doing the same things. Whether it's weird because obviously I didn't skateboard, but I snowboarded a lot, and it's an individual sport, but you do it together, and it's very, you live with these people and you snowboard, you ride with them every day, and everyone is just trying to represent each other, and that's literally all we do now. It's like, what do? We print stickers and we make t-shirts, and that's still, now we have digital, social media, so trying to translate that ethos into a digital world is sometimes challenging, but through branding and, working with artists and brands that are still very much rooted in skate culture, I think that's just naturally how it goes. We don't consciously sit down and be like, all right, now, how are we going to talk about culture? It's just sort of where we came from.
I think that's it. So kcrw.com. If you don't listen to radio on your car, it's kcrw.com. And please don't wait 10 years to be a member. I mean, please be an angel. Please be a donor. It's really a fantastic radio station if you're not a fan already. Now for Lindsay, if you go to Hong Kong, please look up her Yardbird and Ronin and Sunday's Grocery whiskey. I mean, that's another session, another time. Japanese whiskey that she's creating. And also we're kind of anticipating a Los Angeles branch of Yardbird as well.
It's coming.
We're really excited about that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.